With all the pomp and pageantry that graced the 1976 Olympic Games in Montreal, Canada, Nigeria and 27 other African countries announced just days before the opening ceremony that they would boycott the Summer Games event. This action by these African countries meant the loss of over 440 competitors, 173 from athletics alone, including world-class runners like Philbert Bayi from Tanzania, who held the world record in the 1,500 meters, John Akibua from Uganda, who held the world record in the 400 meters hurdles, and Nigeria's boxer Fatai Ayinla-Adekunle, who won a bronze medal at the World Amateur Championships 2 years earlier in 1974. In addition, Montreal lost $1 million in seat refunds and event cancellations in the first 2 days of the Games. But why would Nigeria and other African countries boycott an important event like the Olympics? The Olympic Games offer a uniquely peaceful and mutually respectful meeting place for the nations of the world to showcase their skills in various sporting events. However, it hasn't always been that way, and the Olympics were once a particularly bright flashpoint in one of the tensest geopolitical dramas in the 70s. In 1976, Montreal became the first Canadian city to host the Olympic Games. It was the 21st Olympiad, which was held from July 17 to August 1, 1976. The Games included memorable performances from many athletes, including Romanian gymnast Nadia Comaneci and American decathlete Bruce Jenner. At 3 p.m. on July 17, 1976, more than 73,000 people gathered in the Olympic Stadium to take part in the opening ceremonies. The rituals began with the arrival of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, accompanied by Prince Philip and Prince Andrew, and by the International Olympic Committee President Lord Killarney and Commissioner of the Games Roger Rousseau. This was followed by the procession of athletes into the stadium. After the Queen officially opened the Games, the Olympic flame was carried into the stadium by two 15-year-old athletes, Sandra Henderson from Toronto and Stéphane Prefontaine from Montreal, to the sounds of the Olympic cantata written by Louis Chantini. In June 1976, South Africa's apartheid government massacred over 350 anti-apartheid protesters during the infamous Soweto riots. This generated uproar among other African nations, causing hostile relations with the apartheid regime. Although South Africa had been barred from major sporting events around the world and subsequently expelled from the IOC in 1970. However, on the eve of the Olympic Games, New Zealand's rugby team embarked on a controversial tour of apartheid South Africa in defiance of an informal but widely observed international athletics embargo on the country. The Africans called for New Zealand's expulsion from the Games, but the International Olympic Committee rejected the idea. In retaliation, 28 African countries sat out the following summer's Olympic Games to be held in Montreal, Canada. Although rugby wasn't even an Olympic sport, black-ruled African countries saw an opportunity to punish the rugby-obsessed white minority of apartheid South Africa. The boycotters considered it unacceptable for any country or any international sporting organization to legitimize the South African government in any way, as New Zealand's rugby team had done. The threat of an African boycott had already kept South Africa out of the 1968 and 1972 Olympics, but the African state's threat to skip Montreal failed to bar New Zealand from the Games or to compel the country to cancel the rugby team's tour of South Africa. With the clock ticking towards Montreal's opening ceremony, the boycott threat led to tense negotiations which ended in a stalemate. The IOC argued that its hands were tied because rugby was outside the Olympic Games. Nonetheless, the rugby tour continued and New Zealand was not ejected. As a result, Nigeria and 27 other African countries walked out of the 1976 Games. In fact, some athletes who were already taking part in preliminary competitions had to pack up and leave. It was a key moment in the fight against racial segregation and discrimination in apartheid South Africa, which would end almost 18 years later with the election of President Nelson Mandela. Seeing black athletes sacrifice their chance to play in the games also raised the morale of black youth protesters in South Africa. The boycott resulted in cancellations and rescheduled events, and organizers issued refunds totaling $1 million. Boycotts would also affect results in the two following Summer Games, when Canada and the United States of America boycotted the 1980 Games in Moscow over the Soviet Union's invasion of Afghanistan. In 1984, Eastern European countries retaliated when they boycotted the Olympic Games in Los Angeles. Nigeria is not new to sporting boycotts. In 1966, the country also joined the rest of Africa to boycott the FIFA World Cup that was held in England. More of that in our next video.